You know, one revelation that we got yesterday about Donald Trump's attempt to overturn the 2020 election did not come from the big public hearing yesterday about the January 6th investigation. Rather, it came from Mother Jones magazine, which obtained leaked audio of this guy, Steve Bannon, former Trump White House advisor and double-layered button-down shirt aficionado. The leaked audio is from just a few days before the 2020 presidential election. Now, rewind a little bit and remember with me. A couple months earlier, Steve Bannon had been arrested on charges that he had been bilking unsuspecting donors out of their money by telling them their donations were going toward building a wall on the southern border, when in fact the money was going into Steve Bannon's pockets. Bannon was arrested on this luxury yacht off the coast of Connecticut. It's a yacht belonging to an exiled Chinese billionaire who's kind of a patron of Bannon's. And in the leaked audio we got yesterday, Bannon, out on bail, is at a meeting with a bunch of this Chinese billionaire's friends. Fine crew of folks who worked for this Chinese billionaire's sprawling online network, peddling far-right disinformation. And at this meeting, a few days before the presidential election, Bannon is filling them in on how election night is going to go down.
What Trump's going to do is just declare victory, right? He's going to declare victory. But that doesn't mean he's the winner. He's just going to say he's the winner. The Democrats, more of our people vote early that count. Theirs voted mail. And so they're going to have a natural disadvantage, and Trump's going to take advantage of it. That's our strategy. He's going to declare himself a winner. So when you wake up Wednesday morning, it's going to be a firestorm. If Trump is losing by 10 or 11 o'clock at night, it's going to be even crazier. No, because he's going to sit right there and say they stole it.
Agree.
I'm directing the Attorney General to shut down all ballot places in all 50 states. It's going to be no. He's not going out easy. If Biden's winning, Trump is going to do some crazy shit.
Which is, in fact, pretty much how it happened. I mean, Steve Bannon got the exact time of night slightly off. Trump didn't say the election was stolen at 10 or 11 o'clock on election night. He waited until after 2 a.m. He didn't direct the Attorney General to shut down polling places, but as we saw at yesterday's hearing, about 6 weeks later at an Oval Office meeting, he entertained the idea of having the military seize all the voting machines. But the fact is, Steve Bannon clearly seemed to know the basics of the plan and what it would lead to. Mother Jones reports that elsewhere in the leaked audio, Bannon says that any chance for a, quote, peaceful resolution of this is probably gone, end quote. He said, quote, this is a revolution. This election just triggers more fighting, end quote. And look, you did not have to have special knowledge or psychic powers to know that Trump was likely going to contest the results of the election. The foreshadowing was pretty heavy. We were all forewarned about the so-called red mirage that would appear on election night, that early returns would look good for Trump because of the order in which ballots are counted, which would allow him to claim that his victory was being stolen from him as his lead started being eaten away by Democratic ballots. Exactly what Steve Bannon described as, quote, our strategy. And it's not like Trump himself was shy about talking about this in the weeks before the election either.
The only way we're going to lose this election is if the election is rigged. Remember that. It's the only way we're going to lose this election. So we have to be very careful.
The only way they can take this election away from us is if this is a rigged election.
The Democrats are trying to rig this election because it's the only way they're going to win.
So there may be a tendency to hear this leaked Bannon audio and think, yeah, whatever. We knew Trump was thinking about doing that. But in terms of holding Trump accountable for his actions between Election Day and January 6th, especially in terms of thinking about whether Trump will have any criminal liability for his actions, there is actually a really big difference between, on the one hand, Trump was never going to accept that he lost, and he was grasping at anything he could after the election. And on the other hand, Trump had formulated a plot to stay in power if he lost the election and began carrying that plot out on election night. And based on what we learned at yesterday's hearing, there is reason to believe that Steve Bannon wasn't just spitballing when he was describing Trump's plans to deny the election results. He may very well have heard about those plans from Donald Trump himself, because that is certainly what seems to have happened a couple months later with Trump's plans for January 6th.
On January 5th, the day before the attack on the Capitol, tens of thousands of people converged on Washington. While certain close associates of President Trump privately expressed concerns about what would occur on January 6th, other members of the president's inner circle spoke with great anticipation about the events to come. The committee has learned from the White House phone logs that the president spoke to Steve Bannon, his close advisor, at least twice on January 5th. The first conversation they had lasted for 11 minutes. Listen to what Mr. Bannon said that day after the first call he had with the president.
All hell is going to break loose tomorrow. It's all converging, and now we're on, as they say, the point of attack, right? The point of attack tomorrow. I'll tell you this. It's not going to happen like you think it's going to happen, okay? It's going to be quite extraordinarily different. And all I can say is strap in.
From those same phone logs, we know that the president and Mr. Bannon spoke again on the phone that evening, this time for 6 minutes.
Here's the thing. If you heard Steve Bannon make those remarks on January 5th, and they weren't a secret because many of us did hear them that day, you might think he was just pumping up his listeners or engaging in bravado or quite likely running another scam like his Build the Wall fundraiser. We're going to overturn the election. Send us cash. But it entirely changes the way you hear Bannon's words that day when you know that he had just had an 11-minute conversation with Donald Trump. Quote, "It's not going to happen like you think it's going to happen," end quote. Left unsaid there is because Donald Trump just told me the secret plan for how it's going to go down. Remember, we also learned yesterday that Trump and his allies apparently planned in advance to march on the Capitol, but deliberately kept that plan secret so it would appear that the march to the Capitol was spontaneous. The point here is not about Steve Bannon. It's about Donald Trump. One of the goals of the January 6th hearings is clearly to place Donald Trump at the center of the decision-making around the actual plot to overturn the election, culminating in the attack on the Capitol. It was Donald Trump who spoke to Steve Bannon the day before the attack, prompting Bannon to tell his supporters that all hell was going to break loose the next day. It was Donald Trump who on January 5th told his chief of staff to call Mike Flynn and Roger Stone, allies who had connections to the right-wing militias who led the Capitol attack. It was Donald Trump who gathered his staff in the Oval Office the day before the attack and asked them what the best route was for the mob to take to the Capitol the next day.
Every one of these elements of the planning for January 6th is an independently serious matter. They were all ultimately focused on overturning the election, and they all have one other thing in common. Donald Trump participated in each substantially and personally. He oversaw or directed the activity of those involved.
The January 6th investigation is laying out the best case it possibly can, not just for Donald Trump's responsibility for the Capitol attack and the plot to overturn the election, but for his criminal liability for it.